Well, that was one of the several exchanges between leaders in the debate last night on Bill 21, Quebec's controversial secularism law. Farid Khan is the founder of the organization Canadians United Against Hate. He joins me now in our studio. Good to see you.
Thank you for
Thanks
having
for
me.
being here. What's your reaction to how the federal leaders responded to questions about Bill 21 last night?
Well, first of all, I was very pleased about the amount of attention that was given to Bill 21 in the debate, as well as in the sort of debriefings afterwards on the various media or the various news channels. But the responses, in my view, all of the leaders gave inadequate responses as to how they would deal with Bill 21, with the exception of Mr. Trudeau, who did, let's say, less bad than the others.
Yeah, how so?
Well, he actually was very clear in that he said the government would be very open to intervening in the debate. He didn't say when, but he said it was an option that was available, and he made it very clear that the government, one of the government's role is to defend people's charter rights.
What are your expectations? In the context of how this bill is viewed in many communities, what are your expectations of these federal leaders during a federal campaign? What do you want to hear them say?
Well, I would like to hear them say and stand united and say that it's the role of the federal government, actually any government, but specifically the federal government, to defend people's charter rights when they are violated. And Bill 21 is a clear violation of charter rights in Quebec. The Quebec government would not have included the notwithstanding clause to shield it from charter challenges in certain sections if they didn't believe it was a violation of charter rights. I think that's an indication that that there are rights being violated of people who live in Quebec. And what I would like to see the leaders come out and say in a united way is that we will stand with minorities whose rights are being violated in Quebec, and we will intervene at the earliest possible opportunity.
Let's walk through some of the positions with the Liberal leader, Mr. Trudeau, saying that, look, he reserves the right at some point to get involved. Would you like him to be even stronger than that? Would you like him to say, look, if this thing gets out of Quebec, or, I mean, let me just leave the question there. Would you like to be stronger than he's been, which we reserve the right to get involved? Should he be involved now? Yes,
actually, I think he should take a stronger stand. As I said, I think it's the role of the federal government to defend charter rights and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And there is no restriction on the federal government getting involved at the earliest stages. They could apply for intervener status right now if they so chose. And they could, if they wanted, say that we are supporting the challenges that are being put forth by the Canadian Civil Liberties Association and the National Council of Canadian Muslims against the law. So there's nothing restricting any of the party leaders from doing that, and certainly there's nothing restricting Mr. Trudeau from saying that as well.
Why do you think they're not?
Well, I think it's clear they're looking at the fact that this law has wide support in Quebec among Francophone voters, and they're looking at their chances. However, I find that to be totally incongruous with defending human rights. You know, there was a time in Canada when people supported denying rights to the LGBTQ community. There was a time in Canada when the majority of people believed that women shouldn't have the right to vote. That didn't make it right then, and it doesn't make it right now, and this is the exact same situation, where you have a majority of people in a province who are supporting this law, which violates rights, and the political party leaders are playing politics with it. And I'm sorry, but that's unacceptable.
This is all, to you, this is all about protecting seats or trying to win seats in the province?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And I think certainly both, all Mr. Scheer, Mr. Trudeau, and Mr. Singh, as the three established parties, could very strongly come out and say, we stand united against this law. We don't think that any province should be able to pass laws that violate charter rights, as this law does. And whenever this happens, wherever this happens, we will stand against that, and we will take these laws to the courts to be challenged.
That would be something exceptional, wouldn't it? But it would provide each of them with political cover. If they all said, we feel the same way about this, you couldn't separate them in terms of how you want to vote the province.
No, exactly. Now, that might give advantage to, Mr. the Bloc Québécois, Mr. Blanchette, and also Mr. Bernier. However, I think that there needs to be a change in the narrative about how this issue is being addressed, because if Quebec can get away with this, what's going to happen at another time, whether it's in Quebec or any other province, where they say, well, you know what, this particular issue is inconvenient. We're going to pass a law that's going to violate the rights. We'll include the notwithstanding clause, and then that'll be done.
Do you think that the largely hands-off approach of federal leaders would be the same if this were happening in a different province?
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. And I don't know why, Quebec is treated with kid gloves when it comes to violations of charter rights. Quebec has used the notwithstanding clause in the past, and basically, all federal leaders have basically let it have its way. I'm sorry, but this is like a spoiled child being given into when they're throwing a tantrum. And this is what it is. And frankly, it's unacceptable. I know that from people that I've spoken to, there are Muslim families and Jewish families and Sikh families who are feeling threatened in Quebec. There are people who are considering leaving the province because they feel threatened, and that they feel that their pursuit of their career, whether it's being a teacher, a police officer, or what have you, cannot proceed in the province of Quebec. And when that happens, that's in fact, if you think about it, it's a form of ethnic cleansing. You're
particularly, I think, frame it this way, disappointed in the position taken by Mr. Singh as the only racialized minority leader in this campaign. He seems to have maybe moved on his position a little bit today, still saying, look, I'm not getting involved while it's before the courts. If I'm Prime Minister one day and it gets to the Supreme Court, I might have to look at it then. Is that any kind of substantial move forward on his position to you?
No, it isn't. And in fact, I am supremely disappointed with Mr. Singh. Of all the people who should understand how this law affects people, it should be him. And I think he has abandoned his responsibility as a leading voice. And certainly as the only racialized leader of a federal political party, he should be the one who should be leading the charge.
He's saying he is, to the extent that he's saying, leave aside his position in the court, which is impossible for you to do, I know,
right.
because of the position you take. He's saying, look, I'm trying to get at this another way. I show up in Quebec. I'm a guy. I'm wearing a turban. I'm the embodiment of opposition to this law, and I show up in Quebec, and I'm trying to convince them to look at my values, not what I'm wearing, and I'm kind of trying to get to them almost with love. He's saying rather than taking them to court. What about that argument?
Well, I think Mr. Singh's statement last night at the debate and certainly today, words do matter, but ultimately words are cheap if they're not followed by actions. And his indication is, from what he said, that action won't be taken until this bill reaches the last stage of the judicial process.
Not good enough for you.
Yeah, no, and frankly, you know what? The people who are being affected today, they are looking for leadership among the federal leaders, and I thought, they were certainly looking to Mr. Singh as the only, visible minority leader to take a stronger stance. So for him to be equivocating and vacillating in the way that he has is a supreme disappointment for those people who thought that he would be, the champion of those who are being discriminated against in Quebec.
That's the equation here. He's got 14 seats in the province of Quebec he's trying to hang on to. They're all under threat.
They're all under threat, and the thing is, though, I think everybody watches the polls during the elections, and the polls indicate that, in fact, he may only be left with a handful of seats. But are you willing to sacrifice fundamental principles, fundamental defense of human rights on the altar of political expediency? I think that's the question that has to be asked. Because if you are, then what kind of a leader are you?
All right, Fareed Khan, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.